Indianapolis scoring big, once again hosting the world's largest tabletop gaming competition. Why Gen Con is one of the key drivers in putting the Circle City squarely back on track to score tourism dollars. Plus, Notre Dame's growing role in biomedicine, details on the university's new focus on precision medicine and its potential to revolutionize healthcare. And a classic Made in Indiana movie scene.
All right, listen up. Here's what we're gonna do.
The state's new game plan to get more films like Hoosiers to set up production in Indiana.
From Indianapolis, with an eye on every corner of Indiana. This is IBJ Media's Inside Indiana Business with Gerry Dick. Presented by Ice Miller and Indiana University.
Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gerry Dick. Very pleased to welcome you to the inaugural broadcast on our new flagship station, CBS 4 here in Indianapolis. Very excited about this new partnership with CBS 4 and Fox 59 and extending our brand and reach throughout the state of Indiana. Here's what's making news now around the state this week. After a rough time during the COVID-19 pandemic, it looks like Indiana hotels are getting back in shape. A new study shows hotel room revenue and state and local tax revenues projected to exceed 2019 levels by the end of this year, much earlier than predicted. In Howard County, the Kokomo casting plant will receive more than $14 million from global auto giant Stellantis to convert existing die-cast machines and cells for a new engine. The investment comes just 2 months after the automaker announced a blockbuster $2.5 billion deal in Kokomo with plans for 1,400 jobs. And Hard Truth Distilling Company says it expects to see their brands in 28 states by next year and is adding on to operations in Brown County. Construction underway on a second rack house there that will double the size of its current warehouse space and help increase production by more than 800%. On to our top story now. The convention and tourism sector decimated by the pandemic, but there are definite signs the industry, so important to the state's economy, is back. Visit Indy says last year, Indianapolis hosted more in-person events than any city in the country. And to date this year, Indy has the highest downtown hotel occupancy in the entire country for convention business. The news comes as Gen Con, one of the world's largest and longest running tabletop gaming conventions, returns to Indy. And with more on the numbers, what they mean, I'm pleased as always to be joined by Visit Indy Senior Vice President Gahl. And Chris, welcome. I know you're above the exhibit halls in the convention center. We talk about Gen Con. Gen Con well underway in the background here. Thanks for joining us. This Gen Con convention continues to be a big driver for Indianapolis.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Gerry. Behind me, the exhibit halls are teeming with activity. The Gen Con has been here since 2003. Initially 20,000 attendees, and this year we're expecting 65,000. And every square inch of the Indiana Convention Center being utilized, Lucas Oil Stadium being utilized. And so we're so happy to welcome back this time-tested group to the capital city.
Hey, I want to ask you before we get to the overall numbers. David Hoppe, the CEO of Gen Con, had a statement this week about the abortion bill being debated at the Indiana State House in special session, expressing concern about the potential outcome there and his commitment to Indianapolis. Here's what he had to say.
Passage of Senate Bill 1 will have an impact on our stakeholders and attendees and will make it more difficult for us to remain committed to Indiana as our long-term annual home. Gen Con certainly out front on the RFRA controversy several years ago. Your reaction to that statement from Gen Con's CEO?
Well, we know in the last few weeks, Gerry, there's been a handful of conventions and events eyeing Indianapolis and what's happening at the General Assembly, Gen Con being at the top of that list. So the first to go public with their distaste in what's happening. And so, Visit Indy, we've been around for 100 years. We're a nonprofit who cares about driving tourism forward. And so anytime there's an issue or a convention or event expresses concern, we take note and notice. And so we've helped communicate their position over to the General Assembly in a very meaningful way. And we know this is a very divisive issue, yet at the end of the day, tourism is a big part of our economy. And so we were part of that team to help put that over to the State House.
Hey, Chris, I want to talk about the recovery. Let's go back. How devastating were things in the convention and tourism industry, in particular for Indianapolis, during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic?
devastating is the word, Gary. Tourism globally, one of the hardest hit business segments. At the height of the pandemic, we lost more than $500 million worth of convention business. Hotels virtually empty, and about 40% of our tourism workforce no longer able to earn a paycheck. And so it was devastating. Now, as you mentioned on top of the show, in 2021, we were proud. No other city in the nation hosted more live in-person events and conventions than Indianapolis, Indiana, 255 to be precise, here at the Convention Center and Lucas Oil Stadium, and that helped create a pathway for us to be stronger and quicker to recover than most major cities.
Hey, quickly, what's really driving this? Indianapolis, mostly, and Indiana hosted the entirety, of course, of March Madness last year, which was an incredible feat. What really is behind this early recovery?
Great question. Two things. Early on, the Capital Improvement Board invested $7 million in new health and safety upgrades into this building, the Convention Center. That gave meeting and event organizers confidence to start convening safely. The other is March Madness in totality. The NCAA's confidence in Indianapolis, the Indiana Sports Corps, and city and state government forging ahead, that put all eyes on Indianapolis and validated this idea that we could safely host complex events during a pandemic. That has helped us recover. And initially, we thought 2024 we'd be fully recovered. Yet, because of those events, because of our traction, because of events like Gen Con, we're pacing to probably early in 23 be 100% recovered, if not by the end of this year, when you look at all tourism metrics.
Hey, very quick. We're out of time, Chris. I know the hotel project on Pan Am Plaza moving forward, but I have to ask you very quickly, a lot of speculation about what's next. Will Indianapolis go after the NFL draft?
You know what? Draft or combine, premier events, we've got a long-standing relationship with the NFL, and I think you'll see Indianapolis be competitive in both fronts.
All right. Chris Gahl, as always, from Visit Indy. Thanks for joining us. Great perspective. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Well, coming up next, lights, camera, incentives, what the state is doing to get back into the lucrative game of filmmaking, plus a sit down with another guy in a league of his own.
You take anyone's pay, you give it to them 17 weeks in a row, and then you just turn that faucet off for 35 weeks, you're going to have some challenges.
You know him as Pete the Planner. He talks about challenges NFL players face with managing their money and much more when it comes to finances. He's my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. You can check it out starting Monday at InsideIndianaBusiness.com.
Forget about the crowds, the size of the school, their fancy uniforms, and remember what got you here. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
An epic scene from the classic made in Indiana film Hoosiers. Coach Norman Dale with the pregame pep talk before sending his small-town Hickory Huskers out to win a state championship. Well, that was 1986, and only a handful of film and media production companies have wanted to play ball in Indiana since then. For more on why that dynamic could shift, pleased to be joined now by the man who wrote Hoosiers, Bloomington-based screenwriter and film producer Angelo Pizzo. And Angelo, is always great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
You've been very passionate about this issue. You and others have worked very hard to get this tax credit, which could be up to 30%. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation beginning to accept applications this week. Economic impact is part of it, but as you and I were talking off camera, you really saw a lot of talent leaving the state without this tax incentive in place.
Yes, I became very aware of that when I would give talks or lectures to media school classes. And when I would ask these kids what their plans were, they were always to leave the state to find employment, simply because there wasn't any work here. And what saddened me was there are a lot of these students, or some of them at least, wanted to stay here because they liked living in the Midwest. They liked living in Indiana in particular. They would go to Atlanta, they would go to Chicago, they would go to Los Angeles. But, here we are, our public institutions are spending millions of dollars training these students only for them to leave. So it's a big brain drain problem.
Yeah. Hey, in terms of the economic impact,
there are numbers out there in terms of how much money is being spent in particular states with incentives. How significant, how lucrative is this industry?
Well, let me put it another way. When we first started this venture in 2006 to try to get a tax credit here, there were only 12 states that gave tax credits. Because it is so, the economic impact is so great for so many states, more and more states have taken on these credits, and now they're up to 38. The biggest example, or the prime example, is Georgia. In fiscal 2020 or 22, this year, over $4.4 billion have been spent by film production companies. And that really doesn't say it all, because there's a spillover effect. The economic impact actually should be multiplied by 5.
Well, and I know Hoosiers, as an example, which you obviously know very well, it was filmed in New Richmond, Knightstown, Indianapolis, Brownsburg, Lebanon. So this kind of impact can be spread not just through one community, but potentially multiple communities.
No, and that's one of the great things about Indiana. They have a great diversity in terms of the topography. They have the sand dunes of Lake Michigan. They have the river towns. They have, you know, the big city, Indianapolis, and the topography of the southern Indiana is hilly, where it's flat, in northern Indiana. There were so many places that we wanted to shoot Hoosiers, and we were limited somewhat by, you know, the distance we had to travel from Indianapolis. But I have a film in mind that I would like to set it almost totally in southern Indiana. To really, it's one of the most beautiful parts. People don't even know about it, and no film companies have really utilized how gorgeous like Brown County is.
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to following up on that story. And I know you're working on a film about the first Indianapolis 500. Lots going on in your world. I know you've been very passionate about this tax credit, that applications are being accepted this week. Angelo Pizzo, thanks for joining us from Bloomington, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Well, in this week's IBJ, a look at the future of Indiana's footprint in the electronics industry. Why chicken is dominating the Indianapolis restaurant scene. And checking out this year's group of 20 in their 20s, emerging leaders making a big impact on communities at the start of their careers. You can check it all out at IBJ.com. Coming up next on our show, Notre Dame's role in potentially revolutionizing medicine, how university researchers are blazing a new path in the area of precision health, and the potential impact on healthcare. It's time now to go inside innovation. New from Indiana University, IU Ventures is investing in a tech company founded by 2 alums who created a digital peer support platform. In Tandem Health says the platform helps connect patients and caregivers to others who have experienced the same diagnoses. IU Ventures says In Tandem Health was one of only 8 early-stage healthcare companies selected for inclusion in the most recent Cedars-Sinai Accelerator, a prestigious business accelerator program based in Los Angeles. In the business of health now, for the second straight year, the University of Notre Dame celebrating a record-breaking year of research funding, bringing in $22 million more than the previous fiscal year. Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta is here now with more. Kylie.
Thank you, Gary. During the fiscal year 2022, Notre Dame received $244 million in research award funding, surpassing the previous record set last year. Much of the funding relates to human health, and the university is adding muscle to its work in precision medicine, establishing the BERTHIAUME Institute for Precision Health based on a $20 million gift. I chatted with Dr. Paul Bone earlier today, the director of the new institute, to learn more.
Well, what it really reflects is an dramatic increase in the scale and scope of research across the board, but specifically research that's related to human health. And that's been important in a couple of different ways. One, in allowing us to go out and identify faculty who have research interests in areas that support each other so that we can build up centers of competence and excellence. And at the same time, it's given us the opportunity to develop new centers and institutes which can be focused on a particular part of the human health problem, such as our BERTHIAUME Institute for Precision Health.
Right, and I want to talk about that new institute established by a $20 million gift to Notre Dame. Explain, what is precision medicine and what is the mission of the new institute?
Well, I think the simplest way that I could describe it to your viewers is to say it's the right treatment to the right person at the right time. And that sounds very simple. And most people, when they hear that, they think naturally of genetic information coming from the Human Genome Project, which was finished 20 years ago. And what we know now is that the genetic information is really just the barest outline of what we need to know to really bring these kinds of modern cutting edge tools to impact people's health. So the way I like to liken it is to having a blueprint for a house. And you may have a blueprint and you build two houses, but when families move in and they decorate and they get painting, they look completely different, even though they started with the same blueprint. And our bodies do much the same with the genetic code. And so what we're trying to do at the BERTHIAUME Institute is to develop those tools that would allow us to look beyond the genetic code to what actually happens when our cells translate that into the various molecular components that determine our health.
And let's talk about this from a business perspective. A big focus of this institute is to provide the building blocks for startups. Explain that effort taking place there at the institute.
Well, I think we would all agree that in order to have impact, it's got to move out of the laboratory and out of the library and into people's lives, whether that be at a hospital bedside or perhaps in someone's home. And so in order to do that, it's really critical to have entrepreneurs and a whole community of people who are helping translate those discoveries from the laboratory into form factors that can really be used by people in their own lives. And, I think we're familiar with some of these things. We're familiar with glucose monitors, for example, which have been available for some time now. And the things that we would like to begin to develop will require that we train our students in a different way. They'll have to be trained beyond the laboratory in thinking about ways that they can move their developments into the broader public.
Dr. Bone, thanks for being on the show today, and congratulations again on the funding.
My pleasure, and thanks so much.
In addition to the economic impact, Notre Dame wants the funding and the institute to be a force for good. Gerry, back to you.
All right, Kylie, thank you. Well, up next, we head to Fountain Square in Indianapolis, where Around Indiana reporter Mary Rachel Redmond goes one-on-one with the star of HGTV's hit show Good Bones, the latest business venture from MINA Starsiak-Hawk, when we come back.
Investing in Indianapolis, one home at a time. Since opening their company Two Chicks and a Hammer in 2007, Karen Elaine and MINA Starsiak-Hawk, stars of HGTV's hit series Good Bones, have renovated over 100 houses in central Indiana.
The beloved mother-daughter duo of Karen Elaine and MINA Starsiak-Hawk, they've become nothing short of HGTV royalty since their home renovation show Good Bones hit the airwaves in 2016, putting Indianapolis in the national spotlight. Let's go now to Indy's Fountain Square neighborhood, where Around Indiana reporter Mary Rachel Redmond has details on MINA's latest business venture. Mary Rachel.
That's right. MINA has a new spinoff series of her own, and it's bigger, bolder, and even more of a gamble than any home renovation she's ever attempted. And the title says it all. Good Bones, risky business. So that looked like a little bit of a jump for me outside, coming inside, but there's a reason for it. We can't show you what's going on in here because it's still a work in progress, but who better to tell you about it than the DIY renovation queen, MINA Starsiak-Hawk. All right, MINA, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into with this place?
So much, over $1 million of trouble. Honestly, the way it all started, it was supposed to be a 4-month project, took about 14. So everyone's very unhappy about that, but it's turning out amazing. I saw this listing come up, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and I just had to have it. Terrible decision, terrible investment, but it's been an awesome project, and I'm really, really close to getting towards the end.
What's the difference from 7 seasons of Good Bones? This is a little bit different than that.
Definitely. Those projects, I would say the average investment is probably $300,000 and the average square footage is probably 12 to 1,400. This project, the main house and the carriage house, I think are 6,700 square feet altogether. Just a way, way bigger project. So every problem is bigger. Every problem takes more time to solve and more money to solve. So it's been a huge learning curve.
This whole show is a little bit more invasive.
It's very different. It's much more like cop style. So everything's on camera, whether I like it or not. This was a very emotionally tumultuous project. A lot of that gets edited out in Good Bones because there's not enough time. But I was in my car doing some driving shots and the bottom fell out and I needed a minute. And I was like, I turned the camera off. I drove away so I was outside of the range of the mic and lost it. Crying, yelling, calling everything. I probably blacked out. And I was like, okay, I can go back now. And I pull up and there was a camera on my backseat that I totally forgot about. So it's all on camera, which is probably good. I mean, production was so happy with themselves. But it really is no holds bar for what they have access to. And although I am an executive producer and probably could have some say in how they edit it, I have a great production company and it's going to be really cool when it is all put together.
And you haven't seen this yet, right?
I haven't. We don't get to see anything before it airs.
Are you a little nervous at all?
I am. Honestly, though, after 7 seasons of Good Bones airing, you kind of get used to, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. So hopefully it's not any worse than what I've already seen myself do. Probably a little more cursing.
Well, I will say you have tons of fans here in Indianapolis. And this risky business, Good Bones Risky Business, will debut September 6th on HGTV and Discovery Plus. Mina, good luck with everything. I think that everybody's really going to enjoy this one. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Mary Rachel, thank you. And Mina tells us also that this property is actually listed now on Airbnb. Well, elsewhere around Indiana, steelworkers in Northwest Indiana going to the bank, receiving bonus checks of up to $14,000 based on U.S. Steel's record $1.1 billion in second quarter earnings. Our partners at the Times of Northwest Indiana report workers at Gerry Works and Midwest plant in Portage will receive nearly $31 per qualifying hour in bonuses, all part of U.S. Steel's contract with its union. If you're looking for an affordable place to live, Niche.com says Indiana may be worth checking out. Fort Wayne tops this year's most affordable list with the lowest cost of living in America. Also on the list, South Bend at number 4, Evansville number 7, Indianapolis comes in at number 50. It's compiled from data from the U.S. Census Bureau. In this week's Eye on Education, we go to Southwest Indiana, where Vincennes University has a plan to remedy the nursing shortage. The university will offer a new bachelor's degree program that will provide an accelerated path for licensed practical nurses to earn a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. The LPN and BSN program will be available starting this month. There could be a need for as many as 450,000 nurses this year alone. And that's all the time we have for this week. We'll see you next week.